The commission will come to order. Viewers may notice that we are in a different venue. Our commissioner room is undergoing some repairs, and so we have been graciously invited to use the Surface Transportation Board, very impressive commission room. We're very glad to be here today. One of the features I've noticed is there's actually a spare gavel. I don't know what that says about my good friend Marty Oberman, who chairs the Surface Transportation Board, but I do know he can be tough, and it's one of the reasons why I think we all respect him so much. But I want to thank him, and I want to thank every member of the Surface Transportation Board, and particularly the STB staff, for assisting us with this meeting today. Chief Information Officer Usha Nayak in particular has my utmost gratitude for her making today's meeting a success. It's also been a big undertaking for our Office of the Secretary under our Secretary Bill Cody and our Office of Information Technology under our CIO Edward Anthony as well. In fact, this is a field hearing, so then they've had to do all of the stuff involved with that. So I'm very, very grateful for the work that both the staff of the STB and the FMC has done to enable this meeting to go on today. As with, we've got a very busy agenda, so I won't speak too long in terms of opening remarks. I think we're all looking forward to hearing about the work that Commissioner Bensel has done on the Maritime Transport Data Initiative, which has already gotten some publicity, and many of us have been able to participate in little bits of it here and there, but we're very much looking to the status report there. Also, as with our last meeting, there would certainly be a portion of the open session that is directed as much toward the public as it is towards commissioners, in order to provide important updates on the implementation of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022. Since the passage of the Ocean Shipping Reform Act just this last June, and it's signing into law by President Biden, we have received lots of inquiries about the law and what it means for all various aspects of the industry. As we move forward with implementing the many directives from Congress, we will continue to use the open sessions of our commission meetings, as well as webinars and other online information capabilities, to answer some of the most frequently asked questions and update the public on our progress. Now, in closed session, we will be also discussing some OSRA 2022 implementation issues, specifically the rulemaking directed by Congress to implement billing requirements for detention and demurrage charges and the implementation of the charge complaint process. Now, prior to the passage of OSRA, we had already issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking on detention and demurrage billing, and today we'll be discussing a draft notice of proposed rulemaking provided by the Office of the General Counsel that represents the next stage in the process for that rulemaking, and also addresses the OSRA mandates, which we are obviously busily working on. The conversation will likely include deliberation and policy choices, proposed text, and other internal matters that need to be resolved prior to the issuance of notice. And because premature disclosure of some of those issues could significantly frustrate implementation of proposed agency action, we will hold this discussion in a closed session in accordance, of course, with the appropriate Sunshine Act exemptions. For the same reason, discussion about OSRA created charge complaint process will also happen in a second part of our closed session. But now on to the open session. Mr. Secretary, the commission is certainly ready for the first item on the agenda.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and commissioners. Thank you very much. The first item on your agenda is Commissioner Bensel, update on Maritime Transportation Data Initiative. This item will be presented by Commissioner Carl Bensel. Please proceed, Commissioner Bensel.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's nice to be here. I also would echo the chairman's comments about the STB and their willingness to host us here today. I think we should do more things with the STB collectively to look at the health of the industry. But I want to talk a little bit about where I am on the Maritime Transportation Data Initiative. It's very iterative, so this is basically a summary of where we stand to date. And it's a process that's ongoing. So we're clearly not at the end point of this assessment. I'd also like to point out that I issued some preliminary recommendations, and these are recommendations for consideration, public consideration. So they're still under review and not final. Currently, we are sharing these recommendations with MTDI participants. We did 18 meetings. It's amazing what you can do now online, but we had 18 meetings over a 3 or 4 month period with 80 experts getting feedback on the quality of data that exists on the maritime transportation data system. These were people that were involved in IT, that were involved in day-to-day communications and the movement of cargo, international intermodal cargo. And I really have a debt of to pay for all of the good work that they did in providing assessments to us. At the conclusion of all of our meetings, we held a maritime transportation data summit on June 1st. We had planned to do it online or to make it a public meeting. Unfortunately, we had issues and we're not able to do that. But after that meeting, we got additional comment from all of the participants. And then our staff at the FMC, under the purview of Bureau of Transportation Analysis and Dr. Kristen Monaco and her staff, they put together a summary of all of the recommendations. And we then had additional meetings with international bodies, other participants, and the effort at trying to harmonize data through the system. And so we're still assessing those comments, and preliminary recommendations have been made based on that body. The basic consensus was that we needed to have a system of real-time information on the movement of cargo through the system, that we needed to have a common lexicon, a common set of harmonized information, and the adoption of a track and trace technology to allow cargo to be assessed through the different phases of delivery. And as I said, what we're doing now is we're putting that out for comment. I anticipate maybe a 1 or 2 month period of assessment of information. And really, we queried all of the different parties to the transportation, ocean carriers, marine terminal operators, BCOs, drayage trucking, aggregators, NVOCCs, port operators, inland warehousing, to get an assessment from all parties to the transportation chain, supply chain. And so I'm going to be finalizing the recommendations after additional comment, and I'm meeting with all of my fellow commissioners. I've gotten done everything, done with everyone except for Commissioner Sola. I got to meet with you next week, and then I'll have further recommendations at that point. And I do have a PowerPoint here, but it's we don't really need to go through that. I gave you the summary. So with that, I turn back.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bensel. I'll now yield to my colleagues for comments and questions about the presentation, starting with Commissioner Dye.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bensel. We all realize that greater visibility is essential for success in our supply chain. So I appreciate it. I just wanted to note that, as I understand it, you're also working closely with the Digital Container Shipping Association, which of course is an agreement among ocean carriers filed with the FMC.
We have been, actually, we've been working with all segments of the industry to identify sources of information that they already have and standards that they've set up. I firmly believe that if we don't use what's out there as a base point for consideration of further enhancements, that we've lost a lot of momentum and opportunity. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No more remarks.
All right. Assuming that Commissioner Bensel doesn't have any questions for himself right now, we'll go to Commissioner Sola.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bensel. I believe that, the circumstances that happened over the last year and a half really highlight the need for a data program that you're working on. And I pulled probably 5 random freight forwarders, their files just to look at it. And I believe that the newest one that I saw in there was from 1960 and 1961. So it's been a long time since we've had new freight forwarders come out with some of the data. I mean, the ones that are there now, I believe that they have to keep integrating new technology into there. I did have one question though. I mean, and then let me say that you've done a lot of different meetings with a lot of different people. Are you, in your recommendations, how are you working with other agencies that, for example, would be a handoff? Whether it be Customs and Border Protection, or as we're sitting today in the Surface Transportation Board, or, you know, for rail or some others, because I believe that the data needs to flow all the way through.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. We've met with most of the other federal partners that we work with traditionally on transportation, and we'll continue to do that. So discussions with DOT. And one thing that was sort of surprising was how few federal entities had jurisdiction over port and intermodal activities in the United States. There really isn't anyone else that looks at operational practices and requirements through U.S. ports. It's largely in the purview of the private sector. So we're working with DOT. They have a flow program, which is prototype program, and I have routine meetings. We have a meeting next week to see where they are on that process, and other federal agencies. But really, you don't have that many agencies that have jurisdiction over the practices of port shipping that occur through our system of intermodal delivery. So we're taking all comments and working with, for instance, the only two elements that are available to the federal government are information related to manifest information that CBP collects, and Coast Guard collects information on 96-hour notice of arrival on vessels. And those are the only two data elements that we as the federal government mandate for the shipment of international cargoes. So we'll continue to work with all of the agencies and try to coordinate so that it's seamless, a set of recommendations for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Metz.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. Commissioner Bekich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Commissioner Bensel, for all your work on this huge undertaking. Having just recently left the industry, I can tell you that there's a lot of this territory that you're venturing into that many would fear to tread. So I congratulate you on your bravery. Just the idea of getting a common lexicon will be of great utility to the whole industry. And you refer to it as a dictionary in your PowerPoint. And I think that that's long overdue. I know in another world, I had raised a similar issue about a glossary that ports could use interchangeably on the West Coast. And I was roundly criticized for that. So I think this is long overdue. And standardization, one would think, is very normal in industry, but there's so many different cultural and regional differences in our country and in our world that, and all touched by the maritime world, which are global and are foreign in many instances, that there's definitely a lack of consistency. But I want to thank you for your hard work on this issue. I think this is going to be a very difficult issue, given the complexity of collecting and distributing the data among the parties to a transaction, as well as to governmental agencies. And I think OSRA is going to deal with some of that. And it certainly looks like we're moving in the right direction as an agency. I'm looking forward to comments from the industry on several aspects of the recommendations, including whether we should proceed with conceptually formulating best practices for data transmission, or whether she made into a government mandated requirement, which would then be subject to penalties or for failure to abide by such rules. Also, I look forward to comments from the industry as to how a portal could operate effectively, who should host such a portal, and how to ensure commercially sensitive data remains confidential. In my real life experience, and this would have been my 50th active year working on the waterfront, collaboration and cooperation amongst entities was not the norm, whereas competition and very aggressive rivalry was. So this could be a bridge to prosperity. I'm hoping it is, and I look forward to working with you on this. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner Beckich, any response to the comments?
No, I just want to thank Commissioner Vekich for his efforts. We've been talking about this. I think the effort that I'm looking at is how to take the information that's out there, the players that provide information, and create a greater transparency, not to set up a new system of information flow, but to utilize what's out there, to harmonize that information, and to work with all of the groups to keep the status quo on business and competition, but provide greater information to allow them to be more efficient. I think, you know, the pandemic has revealed that we don't have a lot of space for all of the cargo that's coming into the United States. And so if we don't make the system more efficient going forward, we probably will not be able to accommodate the volumes that we have. So the effort, and you're right, I think Commissioner Vekich, there's a lot of historic rivalry and cooperation has been challenging because the volume of players and actors that are involved in the system. It's not like aviation where you have a confined system, but there's literally thousands of actors in any port complex. So I think we have to tread carefully to make sure we can utilize the existing data formats and try to harmonize them. So that's, I think I'm looking forward to further discussions and further work on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Bensel. I just have a couple of comments and maybe one or two questions. First of all, I do want to echo what my colleague Commissioner Sola said about working across government, which I know you have, but also just how complex this is with so many different industry actors, some of which we regulate, some of which we don't. We tend to be stovepiped in government, but the box, that container, it doesn't care whether it's on a ship or a rail or a truck. It doesn't know, and that information of where it is always going to be important to the shipper, and indeed the recipient, as many of us have been waiting for shipments, particularly over this COVID period. So that's one of the big challenges, and of course, talking to all those groups and the fact that we are the Maritime Commission, so basically. The way that, well, I'm so glad you volunteered for this. Even if I had to twist your arm a little bit, I only had to twist one of his arms, not both. Can you just give us an idea, give the public an, I mean, I know, but give the public an idea of how many and what kinds of groups that you've been speaking to over the past year, because it has been quite remarkable.
Yeah, no, we've had 18 different meetings, tried to cover most of the major actors at least twice. So we got all of the industry involved, but we talked to the ocean carriers, marine terminal operators, drayage trucking companies, critical component of shipping, that you have your trucking organized the right way and they can get in and out of ports, warehousing, distribution centers, NVOCCs that arrange for shipments, BCOs, the big shippers, intermodal railroads. I actually took a trip down to Chicago to meet with the railroads to see what their system of intermodal delivery was. So I think we've covered most. We've also, we're routinely meeting with the administration and different government bodies. And so if we've missed someone, I want them to call me up and arrange a meeting, and we'll listen to what they say. But we're in listening mode right now. And so anyone that has comments or suggestions on how we can do this. I think I would state, Mr. Chairman, that everybody that we queried, that we requested information, said we had to do better here. And it's all the way through the system that we need to do better. Because if it's good getting into a port, but it can't get to its inland terminus, it's irrelevant. So you have to set up a system where data can flow freely to allow forecasting, to allow potential response. But I think we've been talking to the right folks, and this is an opportunity to give a pitch if someone else wants to talk. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Well, I've been watching you crisscross the country and speaking with and listening to so many different groups, and that's it. You know, you've literally crisscrossed the country and virtually. Been all around the world. I think you've talked to so many different groups. It may be too early to assess this, but I'm going to ask it, and you can answer it in any way you want. Given how diverse this is across modes of transportation, across various industries, and across various government entities, do you think, though, there still could be some sort of commercially negotiated solution where the major players would agree to standards, if you will, or some sort of a common lexicon, what should be shared across the board? It is, I will admit, it's a little bit odd. We are an agency primarily geared to ensuring competition, and here we are trying to encourage cooperation in this area. But can you give me a sense of what you think the chances are of achieving, I guess, for lack of a better word, voluntary cooperative system?
Well, we have voluntary right now. And so most of the people that we've talked to said we need federal leadership here. Of course, no one wants to regulate overly hard, but I think the consensus from most of the people that have talked to us so far is that we need a federal role in the provision of standards on how you disseminate and who disseminates. It wasn't just that most of the actors had the information. It's how they shared the information and how they made it available. So if you're, an Apple shipper from Washington State and you show up to a port and you're expecting a vessel to be there and it's canceled its voyage, you're stuck with losing your crop. And so I think that, we have relied on voluntary to this point, and that's where we are. If there's a mechanism to set up a voluntary system that was out there, that was credible and didn't set minimum standards for information, I think we should pursue that. But I don't see any entity out there that could perform that task. So I think that's my preliminary assessment, but I'm going to be talking to a variety of sources to see if there's others. And I've worked on transportation policy for a long time, and it's ironic to think that no one really has jurisdiction over a port complex other than OSHA for worker safety violations and the Coast Guard for marine safety, and no one else really has jurisdiction, but that's what my preliminary assessment has been.
Well, that's a little unfortunate. I totally see your logic in that. I do think certainly we haven't seen it yet, but I also think that the government hasn't no bit of government. This is the first time we've looked into it. For instance, it really has even tried to be a catalyst or anything. So I certainly think there's a role for government to play, or we wouldn't be doing this project at all, I don't think. But I am concerned that coordinating such a multi-agency requirements over several different agencies, because you would need to do several different modes, would be complicated. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be done, but I think that if we can get the industry to meet us halfway, that would be very helpful. Any thoughts?
The industry really has not been, it's not been difficult to convince them that they need to have a set of federal. I really haven't run into anyone who said this is crazy. In fact, most have said, we hope you do this. So when I get to that point, I really haven't found a substantial opposition to establishing national standards for the movement of cargo, intermodal cargo, and our jurisdiction is clearly over certain entities, but it extends to the practices related to the intermodal movement of their cargoes. So clearly we can take a look at that. We've done that in trucking, and we have agreements on chassis, so I haven't, I was surprised, but all of the commenters that we had said we need to have a federal standard here. And so that's where we are now. But maybe as we go through the process of taking comments, we'll start to find someone who says, we can do this together. But just the sheer cost to the economy on inflation, and inflation was impacted by the congestion at the port substantially, means that if we don't take a step to do this at some point, then we're losing the opportunity to save in efficiency and cost. So that's what if there's another group out there that wants to step up and says they can do this, but I'm open. I'm open to listen to see what else is out there and available. I think the effort's worth it.
I agree. Can you give the email, if there's an email address, particularly to send comments or
sure
make further inquiries
for
this particular project?
Do we still have the FMC data? We have a FMC data initiative .com, right? Is it .gov? Yeah, so it's on our website, fmcdata.gov. And it's a website. So we're taking still comments on that. And again, I wanted to thank our staff that worked on this, Dr. Kristen Monaco and our BTA staff that work with us. Also, Carl Savoy and our staff did a lot of work trying to get the meeting set up, and that was invaluable. I thank you, Mr. Secretary, for his use. But I'm open to all comments, all suggestions, all input, and that's where we are.
Well, certainly I knew Commissioner Bensel, you would work hard on this. I think you may have even exceeded that expectation. Are there any other comments on this item from any of the other commissioners? Oh, okay. Sure. Commissioner Vekich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we would be remiss in light of talking about the data system and how we're going to assess and manage and help various parties if we didn't recognize the fact that we've come at a very tough time and port congestion is a lot better these days. And that's because the men and women in the supply chain have worked heroically to move cargo in record numbers, despite all the obstacles. And as we move forward, I want to be sure we recognize that we owe them a great deal of gratitude for them working through the COVID epidemic. They couldn't work virtually. Those containers had to move physically, one container at a time. And so the fact that we have many fewer ships in San Pedro Bay, I think I saw 9 last versus the 90, speaks volumes about the progress we've made in overcoming supply chain problems and port congestion. But I appreciate the work of the transportation workers and all those people that contributed to solving our last port congestion crisis. Thank you.
And they're still doing a lot of hard work. I'm not sure if we could remind us enough of the fact that in the worst of COVID, the workers and frankly, and the executives too, showed up. We got our cargo moving, and I'm not sure. It's one of those things where you think about what Churchill said about the Royal Air Force in World War II. They did, so few people did an awful lot for so many, and they won't be recognized by the broader public, but at least we recognize them, and hopefully more. Any other comments on this? Yeah, Commissioner Sola.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the very obvious, and that is that the supply chain starts with the maritime and everything flows downstream from that. So the information that you are going to provide is going to help everybody in the supply chain.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. Okay. So
Just one
Commissioner
comment.
Bensel.
Yeah, no, I wanted to confirm my support for what Commissioner Vekich said. Sometimes we talk about the problems that we have in moving cargo, but we've moved 27% more import cargo since the pandemic, which the industry, we sit here and we're making these comments that seem to be critical, but we need to recognize that it was a superlative effort to do what they've done.
Amen to that. Okay, so now we'll go on to thank you again, Commissioner Bensel. Mr. Secretary, we're ready for the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second item on the agenda is staff briefing on Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022. This item will be presented by Lucille Marvin, Managing Director, and Kadia Krodel, the Acting General Counsel. Please proceed, Ms. Marvin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Maffei, Commissioners Dye, Bensel, Sola, and Vekich. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022 in this public session. Acting General Counsel Kadia Krodel will be presenting with me. Our goal today is to update the public not only about the status of implementation of OSRA at the FMC, but also to provide additional guidance on certain provisions of OSRA that we think will be helpful. Just as we did in our July meeting, for ease of organization, instead of going through OSRA section by section, we have prioritized and grouped the law's provisions by the topics of enforcement and consumer assistance with themes of exports throughout. Included in our presentation will be information on rulemakings. I would also like to remind our public viewers that a lot of what we will cover today can be found on the Commission's website, www.fmc.gov. We have created an OSRA implementation page, and I encourage everyone to refer to this page for all things OSRA related. Starting with the enforcement topic, I'll now turn the mic over to Acting General Counsel Kadia Krodel to discuss key provisions concerning prohibitions in OSRA 2022.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Today, I will provide an update of what we have worked on since the last meeting, briefly touching on the actions we are taking in the areas of prohibited actions and temporary emergency order authorities. I will also cover a few frequently asked questions. In Section 7, OSRA clarified that the existing prohibition on unreasonable refusal to deal or negotiate includes situations regarding the provision of vessel space accommodations provided by an ocean common carrier. There is also a new related provision that prohibits a common carrier from unreasonably refusing cargo space accommodations when available or resorting to other unfair or unjustly discriminatory methods. These provisions are related to vessel and cargo space, and they apply to exports and imports. They also require new rulemakings. The Commission staff initiated the rulemaking on unreasonable refusal to deal immediately upon the passage of OSRA, and that rule published today. It is open for public comment for 30 days, and we encourage anyone with ideas, information, or views on the topic to send them to the Commission by October 21st. As mentioned above, Section 7 of OSRA also requires that the Commission define the phrase unfair or unjustly discriminatory methods in the new paragraph that prohibits common carriers from resorting to other unfair or unjustly discriminatory methods when engaging the industry. Commission staff has recently initiated a rulemaking project to address this new statutory requirement. We will keep you updated on the progress of this project. In the near future, the Commission will also launch a new way for interested parties to comment on its proposed rules and other notices that request public comments. The Commission will join regulations.gov, which is a federal government-wide website and program, and it will allow a more seamless experience to members of the public interested in the Commission's rulemaking activities. They will be able to share their knowledge and opinions on proposed rules and notices through the click of just a few buttons. This initiative is one of the opportunities that the Commission is providing for public submission as discussed in Section 17 of OSRA. We hope to have more information in the near future regarding how to use regulations.gov most effectively. Next, the Commission also received discretionary authority to issue a temporary emergency order if certain requirements are met pursuant to Section 18 of OSRA. One requirement in that section is that the Commission first issue a request for information asking the public to comment on whether there is congestion related to the carriage of goods and whether that congestion has created a substantial adverse effect on the competitiveness and reliability of the international ocean transportation supply system. That request for information notice published August 15th. The 30-day comment period just closed on September 14th, and the Commission staff is reviewing the comments received at this time. Moving on to demurrage and detention. OSRA also addressed demurrage and detention in Section 7, specifically on calling out the assessment of charges and the information that must be included in invoices for demurrage and detention billing, clarifying the demurrage and detention interpretive rule by further defining prohibited practices regarding the assessment of demurrage and detention charges, including a determination of which parties may be appropriately billed for any demurrage, detention, or other similar per container charge. And finally, an associated provision that eliminates the obligation to pay for demurrage and detention charges included in invoices that do not comply with the related information requirements. Section 7 of OSRA does allow the Commission to adjust the information requirements of an invoice through a future rulemaking, and Commission staff has continued to work on demurrage and detention billing requirements on the detention and demurrage billing requirements rulemaking. It had begun as a result of the fact-finding 29 interim recommendations. We received 80+ comments in the advanced notice of proposed rulemaking that we published on February 15th, 2022, before OSRA was promulgated. Currently, Commission staff is working on a proposed rule and considering comments received, as well as those new OSRA requirements. Today in the closed session, you will hear a staff briefing on the topic. Since the issue of legitimacy of charges and billing is a central theme of OSRA, it may help to provide a roundup of the 3 primary avenues that now exist to challenge a non-compliant charge. Number 1, Commission enforcement actions using new prohibited acts related to assessing or invoicing charges. This could be against a charge that does not comply with existing requirements for practices in handling property, or the associated interpretive rule on demurrage and detention, as well as enforcement action for non-compliant demurrage and detention invoices, where OSRA gave the Commission the authority to issue refunds in addition to penalties. Number 2, a party may invoke the self-executing OSRA provision that eliminates demurrage and detention charges applicable to an invoice that does not comply with the minimum requirements. Finally, a party may take advantage of the new provision on charge complaints. Since OSRA's promulgation, the Commission has received numerous requests for informal guidance on OSRA implementation. Today, I'm going to mention two that we have answered recently. For example, regarding inaccurate demurrage and detention invoice. Some requests have come in asking, does an inaccurate invoice void responsibility to pay the charges forever? The Commission believes that if a carrier sends an inaccurate invoice, that it does not immediately eliminate the obligation of the charged party to pay in perpetuity. Instead, a carrier may reissue an accurate invoice. Parties should take advantage of existing dispute resolution options made available by carriers to resolve the matter. However, a shipper may also file a private party complaint, a charge complaint, or contact the Commission's Office of Consumer Affairs and Dispute Resolution Service for assistance from the Commission on addressing that inaccurate invoice. Another request for informal guidance we have received has been is what is the phase-in period for compliance with OSRA 22 invoicing requirements? The Commission issued an industry advisory found on our website that states that this OSRA 22 provision does not have a phase-in period and was effective immediately. Although the Commission is considering issuing a rulemaking to further interpret this OSRA provision, the statutory language is the current law. That concludes the update on enforcement requirements. I now turn over back to our Managing Director for an update on OSRA's third avenue to challenge a non-compliant charge complaints.
Thanks, Claudia. So as a review, charge complaints found in Section 10 of OSRA enables shippers to submit to the FMC information about complaints of charges assessed by a common carrier. It requires the FMC to promptly investigate the charge for 41102 and 41104 compliance. This provision went into immediate effect on June 16th. This is the big theme. While the Commission is currently developing further policy and a rulemaking to implement the mechanism for a charge complaint review, the Commission is accepting and investigating charge complaints through an interim process right now as we speak. Since the enactment of OSRA, the Commission has received 95 charge complaints to date, and more come in each week. Roughly over half of those are under active investigation, and just under half were not accepted because they concerned matters that predated the passage of OSRA, the submissions were incomplete, or the matter was not suitable for the charge complaint process. We thought it would be helpful to the public today to revisit our interim charge complaints process that we covered back in July, as well as cover some do's and don'ts for successful charge complaint submissions. Parties interested in disputing charges assessed by common carriers that they believe may not comply with OSRA can submit a charge complaint by doing the following. Identify the common carrier, identify the specific alleged OSRA violations, gather supporting documentation, including invoices, bills of lading numbers, and evidence of whether the charges have been paid. Confirm that the disputed charge was incurred on or after the enactment of OSRA 2022, as we've said, June 16th. And finally, submit all of this and any other materials that you think are relevant to charge complaints at fmc.gov. You will receive an acknowledgement from our charge complaints team within 2 days of submission. If the Commission receives sufficient information, we'll promptly start an investigation, which could ultimately result in an order against a carrier for a refund of charges paid and an assessment of a civil penalty by the Commission. Reviews of charge complaints can take up to 30 days, depending on the thoroughness of the submission and the matter to be investigated. If there is insufficient information or if the complaint predates OSRA's enactment, the charge complaint could be rejected. Our charge complaints team will help parties submitting complaints to understand the nature of any rejected submissions. We will also assist parties to find other appropriate avenues at the Commission to file complaints if the charge complaints process just isn't applicable or if it's just not suited. Whether that be through a formal process or informally through our Office of Consumer Assistance and Dispute Resolution Services, the Commission likely has other options for assistance with commercial billing disputes. That said, here are some do's and don'ts concerning charge complaint submissions. Do thoroughly read the charge complaint advisory on the Commission's website before submitting a charge complaint to ensure that it's the right avenue for you. In your submission, clearly identify the alleged violation and provide evidence to support the violation. For example, parties have submitted screenshots to show that no appointments were available when attempting to pick up or return containers. Do submit an invoice, as the invoice gives us a lot of information. It can help us, for example, to confirm where and when charges were incurred and if the charges were related to demurrage and detention. We also know upfront what potential refunds could be. We do not require that the invoice be paid, but it's important to note that there is obviously no refund remedy for an unpaid invoice. Do understand and know what remedy you're seeking. Do not submit complaints involving multiple carriers with multiple invoices taking place in multiple ports. Rather, your complaint should be comprised of charges relating directly to a specific shipment or related shipments with a specific carrier that resulted in related charges that you're disputing. There's no limit to the number of charge complaints that you can file, but don't combine unrelated shipments. Do not carbon copy the carriers or other offices within the commission in your communications with the charge complaints team. And likewise, only submit your charge complaints to the charge complaint email address. And again, without CCs to other parties and the carrier at issue. We just want to keep the process streamlined and efficient. In the event that your charge complaint is rejected, please thoroughly read the charge complaint team's reason why the complaint was not accepted. Explore the avenues that the team presents for other complaint options at the FMC, and please follow up with our staff. We are standing by to talk to you, and our contact information will be on all correspondence. We will keep the public apprised of any further developments on charge complaints through the FMC's website on the OSRA implementation landing page. I encourage the public, the ocean shipping industry, and our state, local, and federal and foreign government colleagues to refer to this page for all things OSRA related. And of course, as I said before, we're standing by to assist with any questions. So with that, I will turn to implementation updates on provisions of OSRA that have a public informational or consumer assistance focus. OSRA's Section 11 investigation section requires the FMC to publish Commissioner Dye's fact-finding 29 report, International Ocean Transportation Supply Chain Engagement, on our website, and that has been done. Section 17A requires the FMC to establish a web page that allows for the submission of comments, complaints, concerns, reports of non-compliance, requests for investigation, and requests for alternative dispute resolution. Commission staff is working diligently on an interim solution that satisfies this requirement. And we are currently mapping out long-term options for such a web page, and our acting general counsel discussed regulations.gov with us. Section 17B requires the FMC to maintain an Office of Consumer Affairs and Dispute Resolution Services to provide ombudsman assistance, mediation, informal dispute facilitation, and arbitration to resolve commercial household goods shipments and passenger cruise disputes. As you know, Caters is going strong. And I want to take this opportunity to encourage the ocean shipping industry and the public to reach out for assistance in resolving any matters that don't rise to the level of litigation. Our staff is standing by to talk to you, and the contact info can be found on our website. Section 17C requires the commission to increase its staff with not fewer than 7 total positions to assist in investigations and oversight in our areas of enforcement, Bureau of Certification and Licensing, Office of Managing Director, Caters, and the Bureau of Trade Analysis. And these hires have either been completed or are well underway. Moving on to other provisions, Section 19 of OSRA directs the FMC to enter into an agreement with the Transportation Research Board of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, under which the TRB will carry out a study and develop best practices for on-terminal or near-terminal chassis pools that provide service to marine terminal operators, motor carriers, railroads, and other stakeholders that use the chassis pools, with the goal of optimizing supply chain efficiency and effectiveness. Efforts to comply with this provision are already well underway. The FMC has been working with the TRB to get a contract in place. The expectation that the study will be completed and the FMC will post the best practices by January of 2024. Finally, OSRA contains certain reporting and publishing requirements for the commission that we are very well prepared to execute. Section 14 requires us to report to Congress concerning practices by state-owned, state-controlled, and certain foreign-owned ocean common carriers. Section 6 requires the commission to publish on its website false detention and demurrage invoice information on all penalties imposed or assessed against common carriers. Section 9 requires the FMC to publish a quarterly report describing the total import and export tonnage and the total loaded and empty TEUs per vessel making port at the U.S. and its territories. Planning and preparation for this information collection is again well underway at the Commission. On August 8th, we issued the 60-day Federal Register notice on this information collection. We're looking forward to reviewing all public comments on this, and those are due on October 7th. This concludes our presentation on Commission implementation of OSRA. We look forward to keeping the public apprised of implementation progress, and we'll continue to issue industry advisories or guidance when necessary. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Marvin and Ms. Crodel. And I want to also thank the people who work under you, which is an awful lot of folks at the Federal Maritime Commission. I will say that both of you look like you've had more sleep than I know you've had, and so you've done a good job in that. I will also say, before yielding to my colleagues, that most people don't get up in the morning with a to-do list that was written by the United States Congress on a bipartisan basis and signed by the President of the United States. You guys do. So thank you for that. With that, I will go for questions or comments in line of seniority. Commissioner Dye.
Thank you. I agree with the chairman's comments about the work product that we have observed and are continuing to observe. Thank you for everything. I will just say on the TRB study, which is one that I'm extremely interested in. I understand we're well ahead of schedule. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner Dye. We are.
That's good. That's good because that's vital. Chassis provisioning best practices has been a vital concern. In fact, finding 29, and it continues. So thank you. And our acting general counsel, thank you for your thorough memo that we'll consider in closed section on the billing rule. The rule was begun before June 16th when OSRA was signed. And we especially appreciate the language recognizing that effort and encouraging us to continue because I think that my colleagues will be pleased with many of the recommendations that we accepted from those 80 comments. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Commissioner Bensel.
Thank you for the presentation, staff. It was a great job, and I really appreciate the work that you do in implementing this law. And but I did want to go back, Lucy, to some of the comments that you made. The charge complaint process is a new process, and but if you are denied a opportunity to use that process, I want you to sort of go back through and emphasize that that there are still avenues to pursue. It's a brand new process, but it's not the only avenue for relief at the commission. So, what are you doing to ensure that people know that if they are foreclosed in that process, that they still have opportunities to seek relief?
Commissioner Bensel, thank you for highlighting that. I think this is also an important message for our viewing public to hear. And yes, indeed, it's not a situation where you're just cut out and you get rejected and you've been gonged off. That's not going to happen. We will definitely present all different manners, whether that is, consulting with our caterers office, with, availing themselves of the expertise of the people who work there to solve their issues. Some matters could actually go formal. We would talk through with the filer and, whose submission was rejected. And we would talk with them about, maybe what we think would be a good idea for them to pursue. So no one's cut out. By all means, before it even gets to that process too, we would let them know, hey, your submission isn't complete, or, do you have this information? So we're there every step of the way to help people out. And then at the end, if there is a rejection, there is a letter that would state what other options there are.
Thanks. You also made a lot of discussion about mediation and dispute resolution and consumer assistance. And I love that we're affirmatively beefing up this, but there's been a lot of issues in terms of potential retaliation where the industry might take steps. And you alluded to it, but I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about our own investigatory authorities that we can take on our own initiative. So I think it's important to show all of the efforts that we're doing. So.
Indeed, Commissioner Bensel. And I think that's something that that even you have all been very vocal about, that retaliation will not be tolerated. And if anyone is experiencing that, please reach out, contact. We've got a lot of avenues for that as well. Our Bureau of Enforcement, we've got our Bureau of Enforcement. We have a new enforcement program, and they are standing by to take these matters. And for that matter, Caterers is also standing by, and we can get these things where they need to be.
No further comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bensel. Commissioner Sola.
Yes. I'd like to comment that I believe that we're becoming more user-friendly. I can't tell you how many times that I'm looking for information and I end up on our website one time or another. And I believe that the public outreach that we're doing and informing the public is definitely in their interest as well. So thanks to the managing director, general counsel, Caterers, who picks up the phone calls and actually replies to everybody. I know you guys were in there a lot during COVID, and I saw a lot of work that you did, and now the system's getting better. And I also believe IT and the Office of the Secretary maintains the website. Is that correct? Yes, it's a very user-friendly, and I believe that we're continuing to go down that route, which will only allow us to do a better job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Sola. Commissioner Bekich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Marvin, Ms. Crodel, I thank you for the overview. And clearly we are operating full steam ahead to implement OSRA 22. Similar to the statement I issued with the NPRM on unreasonable refusal to deal with respect to vessel space allocation. As we go through the rulemaking process, I am looking forward to hearing from the industry what steps we can take to promote U.S. exports. U.S. exports are the backbone of our economy, and I continue to believe we need to do everything we can to promote the growth and development of our U.S. exports, which are very much the mantra of the U.S. Shipping Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bekich. I don't really have a question. I do have a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, on what Commissioner Bensel was asking, I'm going to state this in my own words to make sure I got, if I can figure it out, maybe others can too, because we have gotten a lot of questions, including the other day from the NCB FAA about these charge complaints. So if a detention and demurrage charge, any per diem charge, is even before June 16th, is unreasonable and therefore against the letter and spirit of the interpretive rule on detention and demurrage and against the Shipping Act, it is still unreasonable and still illegal now. The charge complaint process, however, was not established until that bill was signed. And so that particular process, which we think is going to be a very good and speedy process, so I don't blame people for wanting to access it, but that particular process cannot be available by law until for complaints that where the complaint itself, the charge predates the signing. Is that correct? General Counsel's, Acting General Counsel's.
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
Chairman, sorry.
Right. So that's the thing. So, but it's very important to everybody know that we have strengthened it. Nothing before is off the table. It's just that for complaints on charges charged on or after the date of enactment, there's this new process, this streamlined fast track, if you will, process that they can also utilize. Okay. Thank you very much. If I can figure it out, then maybe most people can. I did appreciate all of this stuff, particularly going through all of those various options. We may have you do a web video, I'm afraid. You think I'm joking? I don't think I am.
We're game, Chairman
I
Buffet.
mean, if you had time, I'd ask you to come over and help me build my IKEA furniture. But I know you don't. So let me just say again that, we really appreciate all the work. A couple of notes on dates. October 21st, the Acting General Counsel pointed out, is the date of submission. This commission often gives extensions, more time for feedback because we want to hear from the public. And then in some cases, we give a specific waiver if a comment gets in late. I'm not going to say we won't do any waivers whatsoever, but I do not believe that given the timetable given to us by this law, we're going to be able to do any sort of blanket extension. And I urge people to get their comments in on time. We genuinely do want to hear from you, but we are under the gun on this one. So October 21st is the real deadline for getting in comments on this particular part. Secondly, I want to point out that all of the various things that Managing Director Marvin went through are on our website. So as Commissioner Sola pointed out, our website has been souped up, and if people obviously don't necessarily want to take notes and things like that, but it all should be there. Lastly, I've been informed that there was some garbling of the email for Commissioner Bensel's Maritime Data Initiative. And that is, so if you want to feedback to Commissioner Bensel or any other questions or comments, it's Maritime Data, MARITIME DATA, so all one word, Maritime Data @fmc.gov. And I think that is all I have. Okay. Commissioner Dye.
Managing Director, we did produce a webinar on our complaint process, and that's still pending on our website. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner
Yes,
Dye,
yes.
and that is a very useful tool for the public, indeed.
Yes. And I did hear the same feedback. That's very useful. So thank you, just to point that out.
And my apologies for omitting that from
No,
my
certainly
statement.
not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts, comments? Okay. So we are now going to conclude our open session, but we do still have a closed session. We'll do a very brief 10-minute recess and reconvene at 2:15.